how do you incorporate those two polarized aspects into your life, collectivism and individualism?
Yeah, I love that question. So yeah, it's about, for me, I just think if I haven't dealt with my own inner demons and I haven't gotten my own life in accord, then and I'm not responsible for myself, then I'm going to be looking to somebody else to be responsible for me and to fix my problems for me, which then ultimately will give certain people a lot of control and a lot of leverage. And I think that that could be an inherent problem in the framework of society. And I think it is important, like the better of a person and the more like realized of a person you can become and more conscious and aware person you can become, the better you can then help other people. And the better you can then, be a leader and contribute to the collective. And I think a healthy collective is composed of a bunch of healthy autonomous individuals.
What's up, y'all? Today with me is one of my good friends, Grant Danger Weaver. So Grant's here today, coming live from Oklahoma City. So a few of Grant's uniqueifiers that I've put together are that he studied environmental science. He is a rock climber, and I liked from your clubhouse bio, aspiring dirtbag. That really got me. I like that.
Yeah.
You were a woofer. You would go work on worldwide organic farms all over the country, and in return, you could get lodging or pay or whatever. And you met a lot of interesting people that way. You were a crypto and blockchain early adopter, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today. So that's super interesting. You've met people from the holochain camp, and you've made inroads with a lot of people in that kind of space in that area. And then you worked for Humble Deodorant, which is a natural deodorant company. And you did operations there for them. There's a whole lot more I could talk about, Grant. You're one very interesting guy. You've been all over the political spectrum. You've lived in Taos, California, Hawaii. You've done a lot, man. You've experimented with life. You've seen other dimensions in a way. So welcome to Winter's World, Grant. I'm happy to have you, man.
Well, it's great to be here, man. That was a fantastic introduction.
Yeah. Do you think that summed you up pretty well? Is there anything I
Yeah.
missed?
Yeah. I mean, you could just say I'm a weirdo, but that I like that too.
Unique,
Yeah.
uniqueified, man.
There
You're
you
you're
go.
you're one of a kind. So Grant, I want to start off with some questions. So I did an Instagram poll asking people what they wanted to know about crypto. So we got a wide variety of questions. One I really liked a lot. Ryan Ribley asked this. He said, "How risky is crypto compared to other investments, and is crypto here to stay?" What would you say to that?
I would say everything is risky right now. And I like risk. Risk is a good thing in my mind, depending on, the nature of the risk. But um, it is risky, but it presents a huge opportunity in that risk. And I would definitely say it's here to stay. What the future of it looks like, it's hard to fully know. But the way I look at it, a basic, from a basic level, is fiat is a losing bet right now. If
And
you
what do you mean by fiat?
Fiat meaning your dollars or government backed currency. Yeah, we'll just use that as a rule of thumb for the future. But yeah, so your dollars essentially sitting in a bank account is just losing value. I've already noticed prices are going up and everything. I've been trying to buy a car recently, and I shopped for a car 3 years ago, and everything is much more expensive than it was 3 years ago.
Absolutely.
And so I think, if you have the prospect of being in an asset that has potential to be deflationary or, just appreciate based on speculation, I think that's a better bet than putting it in dollars right now.
And so I want to go into what you said a little deeper because I think everyone does not look at their bank account as an investment, but dollars allocated anywhere, wealth allocated anywhere, whether it's in dollars, gold, securities, crypto, all has inherent risk. So there is, in my opinion, you can tell me if you disagree, there is no safe place to hold wealth right now because dollars are decreasing, gold can change in value. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think if you had land that you could work and use,
Land.
and that you could grow food on, or you had access to your own water and things like that, that's the one thing I would think is safe. It might potentially go down in the short term in terms of dollar amounts, if the real estate bubble pops in different areas, but that's the only like sure safe thing, is anything that you could actually use for survival. But beyond that, everything is pretty risky. It's exciting because certain things could go way up in the short term to medium term, and other things could be going down. And so it's a total shakeup in terms of what has been traditionally stable for so long, which is our economy and our currency and our value system. And it's really an exciting time.
I completely agree. I think we're going through, I think Eric Weinstein calls it the silent revolution.
Mm.
So we're going through radical change without all the noise and all the gunshots and all the bombs, which is good. But there's a lot that comes with that. So I want to get into that a little more, what you're talking about with like the land and how working it, because you have a unique experience for people nowadays where you've spent plenty of time working land. So what, I guess if I were to try to invest in land, what are the aspects that I should look for? And I also want to say, everything we say, we're not giving investment advice. That's a big disclaimer. And we both have pretty heavy risk appetites, so we might be a little more risky than other people are willing to be.
You'd be a fool to listen to me. Uh, but so yeah, I would, the way I look at it is with land. I would want obviously if there's a house and you're looking at it, and if you're looking at it from a prospect of food and shelter, you would want a high water table. You would want water that's close to the surface, so if you had to dig a well, it's pretty, you don't have to go super deep because wells are very expensive. And the ability to have a hand pump well is huge as well. And
Do you have experience with that, Grant?
I do, yeah. I mean, I've like worked on properties that have amazing water access. They have freshwater spring ponds on the properties, having access to amazing spring water as your basis of what you drink, and also what you swim in, is something that I think is totally priceless. I have a hard time assimilating back into suburban life where we're on this other water system, and I don't like the taste of the water. I don't like the stuff they put in the water.
So that's super interesting, Grant, because you there was one time in college where you told me that water that runs through a stream, the molecules adjust in a way that makes it easier for your body to intake that water. Can you
Mhm.
expand on that and kind of, so I live in Dallas and the water is super hard. So I'll get out and like I almost feel scaly. I almost feel dried out. The guy who cuts my hair said that it's super bad for your hair. I think none of us think about our water because it's just there, we all use it. It's ubiquitous. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, it's this concept. I'm not an expert in it, but it was something that as I was in college and procrastinating from studying for something, I started reading some papers on this, and there's a lot of peer-reviewed research on it about structured water. I guess the easiest way to think about it is like snowflakes have these certain like kind of geometric structures and shapes to them.
Crystalline, yeah.
Yeah, kind of these crystalline structures. And whenever you freeze water, you can take put a very thin layer of it under a microscope, and you can actually look at the structures of water. And what they found was water is very sensitive, and water reacts to all different kinds of energy, and also other chemicals in it and things like that. Everything in the world is vibrating and giving off a frequency, so to speak. And even chemicals, they're vibrating and they're giving off certain frequencies. And so whenever they did studies and they found water, and it's not uniform across the board, but typically the water that was coming out of our faucets that had been treated, it had a very not symmetric structure to it. And whenever you put it in your body, there's a lot of research that speaks to your body actually has to expend energy to put that water back into a structure that's able to permeate your cell walls
Wow.
easier. And whenever it's coming from other sources, from a spring or something else, and spring water is not uniform across the board. There's all different kinds of spring water, and they have different, molecules and elements in it. But typically it permeates your cell walls a little easier. And something I would encourage people to look into is Kangen water as well. Kangen water is really interesting.
Kongan, like Congan.
It's a Kangen, I
Okay,
believe.
glad I
Yeah.
asked.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so my partner, she actually has a Kangen water machine. And we have a shower filter on our shower as well, which has a bunch of like minerals in it. I'm not an expert in any of this, but it has a bunch of minerals that it forces the water through, which then strip it of what it has, in the tap water. So whatever kind of metals or whatever they're putting in the tap water you don't want, and then it replaces it with all of these earth minerals that are actually good for your skin, and it turns the water from a hard water to a soft water.
Oh wow.
So when you feel it on your skin, it actually feels really soft and good. And then the Kangen water actually, it runs the water through a series of these titanium plates that then shoots electricity into the water, which will actually raise the pH of the water and change the structure in certain ways. So whenever you drink it, it's supposed to permeate that cell wall and permeate the barrier in your body much easier than most other water would. And I could speak to, whenever I drink it, I do feel a lot more energized.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that once you kind of drink it's and you get used to it, it's kind of hard to go back.
Interesting. So an analog to that I've heard, in survival situations, if you're in a snowy environment, you actually don't want to eat snow as your water intake, because a lot like what
Mm-hmm.
you're saying, your body has to heat up to melt that snow,
Mm-hmm.
and the water expended to do that is actually less than the water you'll get from that melted snow. So it sounds similar in the energy expenditure in order to absorb that
Mm-hmm.
hydration. So that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to go back to crypto real quick. I will say that you and I are going to be all over the place.
We're gonna be all over the place. Yeah,
We always are.
can't fight it.
Yeah, no, well, I'm happily going to go on whatever tangent that comes along. All right, so let's see. This was an interesting question to me, and I think it's going to be interesting to hear what you say about it, because we're both bullish on the crypto space. But Austin Alves asked, what are the main reasons not to invest in crypto?
You want to be a loser. No. No, I guess if you I've never thought of it that way,
There
because
has to be something there, though, if you're going to be completely impartial. There has to be some con.
oh, there absolutely is. And it's just, I guess, all about what you don't want to lose, what you're not willing to lose. But then what makes that a little more complicated is you will lose if you stay in fiat.
Mhm.
um you you know I guess I really couldn't give a good answer to that. I've been all in crypto for the last few years, and from my risk appetite, I don't have much to lose. I
Right.
didn't have much to lose. I only
And
had everything to gain.
and so that's what I was thinking about too. I guess if your grandmother is looking at crypto, it's probably a bad idea for her to invest. If you only have a short amount of time left on the earth,
Mm-hmm.
there might not be enough time to get crazy gain. You want to be safe. It's the same way that retirement funds are structured. So like I'm in the 2065 retirement fund, which is 90% securities, 10% bonds. As you
Mm-hmm.
age, it goes more and more into bonds. So it's definitely a riskier asset. I will say that it has a lot more upside than a lot of other assets. Like it's crazy. If you get in early on something, it can go parabolic, and you could in the crypto space, the way that people talk about returns, and it's warping my sense of it, investment returns. I think it is with my friends too. In the market, if you're doing 8%, that's pretty dang good.
Mm-hmm.
8% in a crypto portfolio, it's like, what
You're
did you do
you're
wrong, man?
exactly. Exactly. I know the stuff I've invested in that hasn't gone into 4-digit percentiles upward. I'm like, God, I shouldn't have picked that
Right,
one.
right. It's a loser, even if it went up 100%.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess I'm much more reluctant. I was trying to get a lot of people into it 6 months ago, before things really took off. I'm now much more cautious with encouraging people. I can't give advice, but encouraging people to look into it for themselves right now, just because it already kind of tanked today, and it could have more to go down. But it all depends, I think, on what project you're picking, and how long you're willing to hold it.
Right.
And if you're looking to make a quick buck, then it's highly risky, and you could have to wait years. The first investments I made, I had to wait 2 to 3 years before I was back in the green on certain things. And so it's all about your time frame and your patience. And then I guess the other reason that you would not invest in it is if you don't understand it at all. I think that's a big worrisome thing, is a lot of people hopping in and not understanding any aspects of it. You should never get into something that you don't understand. But then I guess by nature, those people that wouldn't understand it probably don't understand their own dollars that they hold right now either.
I guarantee you a majority of people don't understand their own dollars.
You got to place a bet somewhere, So
Yeah.
But I just encourage people to try and wrap their heads around what it actually is. But I know, since it is very intangible, it is, and it's an intersection of, computer science, economics, all kinds of things. It definitely is a big challenge to dip your feet into.
Yeah, and that actually leads perfectly into the next question. Adam Mills asked, what is the best way to start educating yourself on crypto? And when you answer this, can you give some names out of people to follow on Twitter, look at on YouTube? Because I kind of know where you're going to generally go, but it's helpful to point people in specific places, I think.
Definitely. YouTube University. I've been going there for a while. No, that's not an actual channel, just YouTube in general. And that the hard part is having discernment about who to listen to, because there's so many channels out there.
And it's good to get opposing views, obviously. See people who debate kind of different. It's like Peter Schiff is an outspoken anti-crypto guy. Hear what he has to say. And then like Charles Hoskinson, someone like that who's founding Cardano. Yeah, YouTube's a great platform. But so like, how did you get your toe in? What's your story? How did you become interested in crypto?
Yeah, I think that's a better way to frame it. So I started looking into the Federal Reserve when I was in college, procrastinating again.
My lovely employer.
Yeah, exactly. And so I started looking into, there's a book, or I guess it's like a government paper called Modern Money Mechanics. And they talk about the fractional reserve banking system. And, once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, you start to realize, like, oh, wow, this stuff isn't really backed by anything. I guess it's backed by the military and some other stuff, but it's not what you would think it is. And dollars are not what you think they are. And I watched a documentary. It was Zeitgeist.
Okay.
And I think it's on Netflix, or at least it was on Netflix. Zeitgeist Addendum, I think, was it. And that blew my mind, because it kind of frames it in more of a liberal way, with like structural inequality, and they pose some solutions at the end. But the critique, or they get into the meat of how the Federal Reserve works, and how our fractional reserve lending, and how monetary supplies are expanded over time, how the money supply is heavily centralized, the monetary policy is heavily centralized, and that it's actually a private institution that is running it, and not public policy as people would think. And that was my start into it. And once I wrapped my head around that stuff, I got heavily into silver and gold. And I had invested in silver back in 2009, after the financial crisis. I bought a bunch at like $50 an ounce, lost a bunch of money. But I was young, in like ninth grade or something, and I got my skin in the game. And then I thought precious metals were all that. And I was just one of those people that was kind of waiting for the system to go belly up, and for dollars to not be worth anything, and then have my precious metals be the one thing that saves me. And then I heard about Bitcoin, probably in late 2016, early 2017. I heard about Bitcoin and learned about it, and I thought it was amazing. I loved the I didn't fully understand it, but the principle of it kind of, captivated me and grabbed a hold of my mind. And um, I'm sure there was some hype involved in there as well, but I, it was $1,000 at the time that I first got
Jeez.
it, like saw it, and I had $1,000 to my name, and I almost bought one or part of one, and instead I blew all that money going on a trip with some friends to Southwest Texas, and then by the end of that year, a year later, if I would have held it, if I would have timed it right, I could have turned that $1,000 into $20,000.
Yep.
And so I was kicking myself by the end of that, like, never again will I miss that opportunity. And then so throughout this whole bear market of the last 3 years, I've just been acquiring and acquiring, knowing that this is going to take off again, because I felt conviction about the fundamentals of the technology and how they could change the world, and or at least disrupt our current financial
Right.
system.
And so I like, I guess that's a good segue into kind of politics there, because what's interesting about you in 2016 or 2017 is that your political leaning was the opposite of the entire crypto culture. So, a
Mhm.
brief history for people who don't know: crypto and Bitcoin kind of emerged out of a libertarian ideology, Austrian economics, free market capitalism, with minimal government intervention. So the decentralization, there was a lot there to get government out, get the Federal Reserve out, and let markets be completely open, frictionless, and free. And I think there's still a lot of that. And so at that time, you were very far on the other side of the spectrum. So people like you weren't typically drawn to Bitcoin. So what do you think drew you into that space, to be interested in that?
Well, I would say probably a year before. I mean, I've been all over the place in terms of my political leanings. I was raised, heavily conservative Christian.
Right.
I loved George Bush growing up, and felt very threatened by Barack Obama when he was elected. And then, you learn some sociology and some other stuff in college, and then, I the pendulum swung that far the other way, and I was like a Marxist for about a year, and wanted, believed in the Bernie Sanders 2016 vision.
Yep.
And so um once I
Did it
started
change
learning,
you, Grant? Did it change you politically?
did Bitcoin change me politically?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't necessarily Bitcoin. It was more so learning of the Federal Reserve, and learning about what our monetary system is actually founded on and how it actually works. And once I realized that, that basically the concept of the petrodollar, that the dollar was pegged to oil, and that we needed all these foreign wars essentially to continue to have the purchasing power that we have. And then that purchasing power was the purchasing power that Bernie Sanders was saying we were going to pay for, education for everybody, and
Healthcare. Yeah.
fund all these great things. And then I realized, oh, so you still need this empire. You have to have this hegemonic empire, economic empire, that has the reserve currency of the world to even make any of this stuff feasible. And so while I liked that utopian vision of, we pay for it, like we allocate the spending power towards the common man, I knew it wasn't sustainable. And then it was kind of around that same point I started learning about Bitcoin.
Okay.
And I had kind of already by that point was still like socially was left, and socially, wanted people to be able to express themselves however they want. And I kind of had some resentment towards the conservative Christian background that I was raised in. But then I learned that it's not so simple, and this vision maybe wasn't so feasible after all, in terms of we'll just pay everybody like a universal basic income, and
Mhm.
it's everything's going to be sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that your open-mindedness politically could be taken the wrong way, but I actually admire it. The fact that you're willing to take in new information, change what you believe, and you're fluid on that spectrum. As new information comes available, as new ideas become available, you're happy to incorporate them into your worldview, generally. And so I guess now at a time of hyper political polarization, I know that's old. Everyone talks about that since pretty much Trump was elected. How, I mean, to me, there are few people like you that are willing to move politically. You are raised in what you believe, and you might believe that, or the opposite. Kind of like you in college, you were raised one way, and in college, you're super rebellious against that way. It's an overcorrection to the other side. How do you think the country, United States, not the whole world, goes about coming back to the middle? Like, is there a path of reunification where most people are centrists? You have the crazies on the wings, or is it already like that? And it just seems like they're super loud wings. Like, what do you think the political future of the country is, and are we going to become less politically divided?
I hope so. It's hard to say, especially, it's hard for me to interact with most people. I've always, I've definitely gone into like a hermit phase for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've just kind of been this outsider looking in on what society's going through. And but I've also been heavily involved in very far leftist groups since college.
So that's what's interesting too. You've moved further right generally since college because you were as far left as you can be.
Mhm.
And can you, I mean, I don't know if commune is offensive or what, but
No.
okay, so can you talk about your communal experience? Like
Yeah,
what
well,
was the place? What was the story? Because you've been surrounded by, in woofing, all of that. You've been surrounded by what most people call hippies, I guess.
yeah, for sure. I was kind of drawn to that based off some, experiences I had had where I had gone to some very, I was a rock climber and loved to go out and go to some very isolated places and climb and take photos and backpack and things of the sort. And I met a lot of, I guess, more rare people that way.
Unique.
People, yeah, unique people that were kind of doing their own thing. And I always really admired that and envied that. And it was kind of blowing my mind by like, oh, what's possible, and like in terms of lifestyle and worldview. And you meet a lot of free thinkers that way, and especially kind of in that like uh communal world or intentional living world. You definitely meet a lot of people that have kind of uh you know felt intimidated, I guess, by society in some ways, kind of drawn back, and they have kind of their own ideas of how things are. And that spectrum that exists within mainstream society kind of ceases out in those places.
Interesting.
um,
What do you mean by that? Like, so
so
you no right and left, or
yeah, the typical right left divide. I had met a lot of people that you would find nuggets of right and left in them and in their worldview, and then that kind of opened me up to, wow, it's not black and white. Truth is always somewhere in the middle. And to get back to your question of like, how do we get around that? For me, um, I listened to like a lot of Alan Watts in college, and got into kind of this more, I guess, spiritual, new agey side of things. That's a big side of who I am. And I've had a lot of, experiences through plant medicines and ayahuasca and stuff of the sort, which has opened me up to, there's so much more going on than this 3D world and the problems of this 3D world. And while we do have to deal with them, it gave me this compassion for every single person, knowing that everyone is just a makeup of, the it's like a base of like who they are, and then how they've interacted with society and how they've been raised. And like you said, for some people, they either believe the same thing that their parents believe, or they get emotionally polarized to their parents and they're hurt in some way, and then they want to believe the opposite of what they believe, from this point of, I want to prove my parents wrong. And I went through that, and
and I did
lucky.
too. I went through it with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we would have these long dialogues, in college of, like spewing Marxist propaganda.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I want to actually get into that. So I think in the arc of history, we've had a lot of, I mean, religions are a human universal, right? Until as of recent. And I think science is wonderful. I love science. It's brought a lot of great things for people, but I think that there is something within science that makes us think that the world is black and white, and we've lost a lot of the mystery. Like, so in the Catholic Church, they say the mysteries of faith. In a scientific mindset, you want there to be a right answer for everything, but life is hairy, life is gray. And in this modern world, I feel like a way to break out of that, a way, I think there are multiple, but a way is experimentation with hallucinogens. And so you've said you've done ayahuasca. I've never done ayahuasca. Can you tell me about your experience if you're comfortable telling me about that?
Yeah, yeah. It was, it was kind of this ceremony with, about 8 or to 9 other people that I was kind of living and working with at the time.
Was it in New Mexico?
It was in California, actually.
California. Okay.
And so I had at that point kind of taken some other psychedelics like LSD and psilocybin mushrooms recreationally in college, and had really profound experiences with those. But then when you do it in this more intentional way, where you kind of cater your diet before, like a week before you do it, you try and eliminate a lot of stuff, and then you try and get really intentional about what you want out of it, and put a lot of energy into it. It whenever you give that energy to it, it kind of gives that back to you through your experience. It kind of shows you what you need to be shown, and the profundity of it is just undeniable. Like whenever you go through it and experience it, you can't, it's more real than anything you've ever experienced. And so what science loves to kind of, or at least the mainstream science, it's kind of coming around to it now, but it loves to kind of, it tries to put it in this box that it's beyond that box. It's beyond what our rational minds can really conceptualize and conceive, because they're based in this three-dimensional world, and whatever you're experiencing is kind of beyond that. And it just opened me up to a new kind of intelligence, I would say.
What do you like, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence? What do you mean exactly by that?
It would be, yeah, definitely emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence. Knowing that when you're feeling something, I guess, in your heart or in your body, it's an intelligence within you that's communicating something to you. So you could think of it as like a gut feeling. We have all these like phrases for it and in the West, but we don't really think deeper about them. But like a gut feeling, it's like, well, why would you have a gut feeling about something? Like your stomach is your stomach, it digests food, but it's like, no, it's playing this other, your whole body is this large piece of intelligence, and your mind is part of that. And I think there is this internal guidance system that we have that you can really put a lot of energy into learning how to tap into, and that will kind of lead you down some other paths that if your mind was calling all the shots, you wouldn't really get to those same conclusions. And yeah, I think I'd leave it at that.
So Kahneman, he's a philosopher, talks about that. There's two ways of thinking. There's your instinctual way of acting, which I think is what you're talking about, your gut feeling. It's deep within you. It's not a conscious choice. It's subconscious. It's just something that comes out. And then there's the slower, rational form of thinking. So do you think we've lost some of our connection to our animalistic self, our instinctual self?
Absolutely. And I can speak to that because I had completely lost that. And so growing up, the lifestyle I lived, the activities I did, the food I ate, the water I drank, all of that stuff, it was leading me down like, I just felt very detached from the truth of who I was. And I felt like the decisions I was making were not my own decisions. They were coming from external sources, whether it be just, social pressures at large. When the concept of like praying and all these other spiritual concepts made no sense to me because I wasn't feeling it. I was detached from the actual feeling of that. And it's probably because I was in my body was heavily inflamed all the time, eating, bad foods. I had a bunch of toxins in my system, and I wasn't able to fully connect with that, I guess, emotional system within me, in my heart space, and what have you. it felt bad and sluggish to be in my body. So then I continued to look for um, fixes outside of myself. I looked for distractions constantly. Like, it didn't feel good to sit and be present with my own body. So then I'd play video games, or I would, smoke weed, or I would take Adderall, or I would drink, or I would eat junk food. And it's always trying to escape from yourself. And a lot of that is just coming from you're out of harmony or out of alignment with this deeper intelligence within yourself, because you are unhealthy. And whenever you do connect to that, you feel unhealthy. It doesn't feel good. It feels sluggish, and you're not able to, you just want to continue to run away. But if you can kind of get past that hump and try and cleanse your body, cleanse your intentions, and, you know, um,
I
I'm
mean,
I'm
I
yeah.
bring balance to the mind, body, spirit triad. Like if one of
Yes.
those is out of order, the rest are out of order, I think, right? And
Mhm.
so that, I mean, how much of you getting your, it sounds like what was going on was your physical side was out of order because you weren't eating properly, the things you were ingesting was wrong. Your spiritual side had altered severely because you had, and I've spoken to you about this, growing up religiously, you had very intense religious experiences. You were very in touch with that side, something larger than yourself. And I think all humans desire that, whether it's in a conventional religion or not.
Mhm.
Who am I to judge?
Yeah.
And then that'll bring your emotional side out of whack too. So I think there's something about unifying and balancing all of those things that has a net positive effect or net negative effect across all boards because they're all connected.
Mhm.
Do you think experimentation with hallucinogens was your only way to find obviously no one's ever going to find a perfect balance in that, but to start to order your life, do you think that was the only way to do that, or do you think there are other ways to be enlightened, awoke?
Yes. Yeah. There's plenty of ways. And I think hallucinogens are kind of this temporary shortcut that you can take to kind of like show you what's possible. Um, but the experience will end, the chemical will wear off out of your body, and then you'll be back to where you were at before. And so it kind of can point you in the right direction. But what was really needed was the actual integration of what it's telling you, and that's the most important thing. And that is the actual lifestyle choices that you have to alter, and embrace in your day-to-day life. So whether it be, changing what you eat, changing your routine, meditating every day, reflecting every day, journaling, whatever, what have you, and trying to get in touch with that part of you. That's really the only way, I think, in the long run, like to sustainably be in a place like that. Because while I do talk fondly of these substances, I mean, horrible things can come of these substances as well.
Okay.
And they, it's not to be,
Played
it's
with.
not, yeah, yeah, exactly. It needs, there needs to be like intention behind it, and there needs to be discipline behind it as well. And then also a lot of research, because I've known certain people who have had bad reactions to them. I've known multiple people who've had schizophrenic breaks from them. So
Wow.
if you're prone to that, there's definitely a risk involved.
So yeah, so I want to get into that a little more. Ayahuasca terrifies me.
Mm.
Like because I've heard of there can be vomiting. It's very intense. You leave your body, or you may astral project. Did you meet a mother, a god figure, a holy being, a divine spirit? Did you commune with something bigger than you? What specifically? Kind of, can you paint a picture for me what your experience was like?
Yeah. So that there is this vomiting involved, and that's, they call it purging, and that's
And that's
where,
when you, after you drink the tea, like, where were you? Were you outside? Were you, is it
yeah,
at
I,
night?
I
Was it
was
during the day?
I was as hippie-ish as it can get. I was in a yurt structure, which is like the
Okay.
circular tent,
Yeah.
and there was a woman playing a didgeridoo in my face the whole time, and
That's great. That's great.
it was interesting. But yeah, you drink it. It's a brew, and it takes a while to kick in, and then um, it you can continue to drink it if you want to, and like about probably every 30 minutes you can get up and get another cup if you feel so called to do so. But then I most people do vomit or they purge, and it's this very interesting emotional experience that you
Mm,
have, where as you're physically throwing up, you're releasing some kind of pent up emotion within you, whether it be trauma or anger or frustration, whatever, that will come out. And as you are physically vomiting, you will feel that release of that emotional tension as well,
interesting.
which I had that experience. And then people say, ayahuasca is has a very feminine presence, and the only way I could describe how I felt was it was like being a little kid and having, like my grandma, more or less, my grandma like holding me and hugging me and telling me it's okay. That was the same emotional response and emotional experience that I had when I was on it.
And
And
was it
then
like a you're okay right now, or everything will be okay feeling?
so I guess in that moment, you feel, you experience it in that moment, and then, after, you can always reflect back and go back and know it was this kind of timeless universal sensation, although like time progresses, and then the next day you might feel a little tired, or what have you. You can always kind of go back to that and tap into that and know, like, okay, I'm held, I'm okay. And I guess that's kind of the lasting of impacts of it. But it definitely takes, it takes the discipline and the focus and the desire in your day-to-day life to actually want to integrate what you've learned. It's not like you'll just take it and then everything will be better.
Gotcha.
It will invoke some kind of feeling or profound experience within you that you can then kind of hold in your back pocket and go back to in the future as kind of like a rock of an experience that you can be like, no, like whatever I experienced and felt there is what I'm trying to carry on into the future and create for
Would
myself.
you say it's a truth that you experienced? Like, would you call it a truth?
Yeah, it was more true than any true piece of information that I read, because it integrated uh so much feeling into it, and feeling is in my mind, it can be, emotions are far more powerful than thoughts. Emotions will influence people to do
Crazy
uh,
stuff.
crazy
Murder.
things. Yeah,
Yeah.
murder. Yeah, exactly. And so the kind of like emotion that you feel on it, um it feels very, very true. I would say it's more real than most things that you experience in your day-to-day life.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And the way you talked about vomiting, I've had similar experiences just from like a panic attack. Like,
Hmm.
you're overwhelmed. Oh my God, what's gonna happen? Blah. And then
And you
you're all good.
release.
You're all
Yeah,
good after that. Yes. There's something
exactly.
centering about, and it's something connecting your like psychology with your physiology. And it's crazy how interconnected we all are.
Hmm.
And I've heard you talk about oneness before. What do you mean by oneness?
Well, the it's, I guess, if you get back to this idea that everything is energy, frequency, and vibration, um, we're all the same energy, more or less. We're all this energy is coming from the same source, so to speak. You could look at it that way. Um, Oneness is kind of something that I experience more so than I'm able to conceptualize, and it's something that you definitely experience, or could experience while taking, a medicine like this, or you could get to it through uh, deep meditation, or you could get to it by, like what your dad talks about in his book with flow states.
Mm,
It's just about getting out of your awareness of what you're doing, and like, at least like this, it's like from the outside looking in on yourself, you're out of that and you're just fully immersed in your body, you're fully in the moment. And I would think of that as oneness.
okay. I like the out of body thing. There's something, Eric Weinstein talks about this. You and I have talked about this too. There's a power to having a metacognitive perch. And what by that, what I mean is like, a place where you can be rational and kind of leave yourself out of it. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I think metaphors are so powerful in human conversation for that reason. So, say you're going through something with your girlfriend and like there's a lot of strife, it's hard for someone else to give you advice on that specific situation because you're so emotionally involved.
Yeah.
It's hard to leave your emotions behind. But if I take that situation and compare it to another situation where you're not emotionally involved, it's
Hmm.
a lot easier to let your rationality shine through. And I
Hmm.
think that that's one aspect of the power of metaphors. I think there's plenty more. And I think metaphors, and I think ancient wisdom is like that. Like everything in the Bible or the Quran or the Talmud, I don't think you're necessarily supposed to take that stuff literally. I think that there's a power in the what it I don't know within it. It's really hard to talk about, but there's
Hmm.
something powerful there. And so I think that that's kind of cool that you compare it to rock climbing. And I mean, I've experienced it rock climbing where you're just so immersed in the moment that nothing else in your life matters.
Hmm.
Um, where have you experienced flow states outside of rock climbing?
I would say any physical activity. I'm a very physically inclined person. I got heavily into trail running, and just getting into my body is really important for me. And that's largely where I experience it. I do have a hard time um, sitting still, I guess. And so a lot of times my mind is kind of, going crazy whenever I am sitting still.
Yeah.
I guess another thing would be playing music. I've played music for most of my life, and that's another way to really get out of it and just get into the moment. And um
So I think that those things force you to be present. And I think that
mhm,
that's a lot of the cool part about the flow state. I know that Lao Tzu talks about if you're depressed, it's because you're focused on the past. If you're anxious, it's because you're focused on the future. You can't play a guitar thinking about what notes are coming up. You got to
yep,
play the note as it comes, you know. When you're running on
exactly.
a trail, you've got to see where your feet are being placed. When you're rock climbing, you got to
Yep.
see where that neck, like put right where your hand is. You can't be looking up
Yep.
what the next hold is. So
Exactly.
that's I think that's cool. The centering in the present is super powerful. But I do want to go back to integration, what you were talking about from the hallucinogenic experiences. Do you think a lot of mental health issues today are from, or what do you think is causing? Because I read a study saying like kids in college right now, anxiety is at all time highs, depression's at all time highs. You and I have both dealt with that. I think every human has dealt with that. And I know some people have neurochemical imbalances. If I'm trying to solve my anxiousness or my depression, what do you think is super useful? What do you think the best medicine is?
I would say going back to your childhood, and because whenever you're very young, your brain is in this, you're basically a sponge to everything that's going on around you. And that's a good thing because you have to learn what is what. And, but if your parents are going through heavy emotional stuff, or whatever your environment you're in as a kid is, you're just picking up those imprints of what is going on. And you will solidify those imprints into who you are, and for better or for worse. And so you could have very amazing and good experiences that then allow you to move forward into the future very lightly, and accomplish amazing things in this world. Or you could have a lot of emotional baggage. That term, it's like you're carrying all these emotions from, largely it stems from your childhood, and childhood traumas. And so I think it's very important to kind of try and get in touch with your formative years and what was going on then, and that by looking at that, you can get in touch with these very rudimentary feelings within you, and that's kind of your subconscious mind, essentially. So what was imprinted into your subconscious mind? How did you learn to react to certain things? Because I think the biggest issue in the world today, like especially going back to this political polarization, is just reactionary responses. It's just
Mhm.
all emotion. It's not about the actual debates anymore. It's just about being right over
Right.
somebody else, and you're just projecting that pain and that trauma that you have within yourself onto the world at large. And so I think for me that's what helped a lot to kind of contextualize who I am and where I'm at and why I act certain ways and just why I am the way I am because
So how
I
did you explore that? Did you write about it? Did you meditate on it? How did you explore what was right and what was bad in your childhood?
it's something I'm still doing,
Okay.
and it takes a lot of awareness. Yeah, I journal most days. I have been doing that for quite some time. Um, for me, it was just put in my face. I had to deal with it because I was going through some very heavy addictions in college that were just draining my life of everything that was important to me, and I had to face that down and try and get to the root of like, what am I doing here? What's
Mm-hmm.
going on? And then once I looked at that, I realized, oh, this is the same thing my mom was doing when I was young. It's like
Interesting.
I'm dealing with the same anger that my dad had when I was young. And um, so journaling helps a lot. Plant medicines can help a lot.
Meaning
Um,
what? Like drugs or
Ayahuasca
okay.
or yeah, ayahuasca or psilocybin mushrooms. I've had I ayahuasca I know is really great for you will a lot of times people will report like revisiting experiences from their childhood and certain traumas and a lot of things that people forget, like because
Hmm.
you talk to a lot of people and myself included, you don't remember a lot of things from your childhood, so
Right.
that's the hard part about how do you even access those rudimentary memories that you have. And so that's where you know plant medicines like ayahuasca or psilocybin mushrooms could come in and help you in that way. And then there is psychotherapy and all kinds of things, and where they try and get you in hypnotic states, and basically almost like sleep states. So then you can try and go back and access these things that you couldn't really access if from your conscious mind standpoint.
Fascinating.
And so it is, there's no like certain fix in this field. But I do think it's important for everybody to at least acknowledge that there is something else ruling you. There's a subconscious part that is dictating how you react and how you behave to certain things, and I think it's important just to start exploring that.
Interesting. I've heard that said differently as like everyone has a god whether they know it or not.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like you choose what you want to do or believe in what your highest power is, or there's going to be one by default. It's like you write your story or someone else writes your story about you.
Mhm.
And I think I'm gonna try to make a connection here. If I'm way off base, tell me. Okay. So just knowing you and your biography, it seems like when you were in your Marxist phase in college, very extremist, and I was right there with you, so I'm not shaming or anything. Um, a lot of your internal trouble was projected onto the political global stage. It was like, I'm not feeling right. What can I do? Or how do we fix the world so that I can feel right? And I think I felt the same way. What made you then change and go, you know what? I'm just going to deal with me. I'm going to look at the man in the mirror and I'm going to make myself the best man I can possibly be and not worry about the political stuff as much. What was there something that sparked that? Am I way off base? Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think it was when Bernie Sanders was cheated off the Democratic ticket that year, and I
Really?
realized that. No,
Okay. I was like, wow, that's really
once I realized that, oh wow, the guy who's trying to fix all my problems for me aren't going to be here, so now I have to deal with it myself. No, yeah, I guess I can't really. For me, it was that that defining moment for me was that addiction I was going through. With I was addicted to prescription stimulants, so like amphetamines, Adderall, whatever. I was just taking more and more and more, and I deal with ADHD. It's hard for me to kind of sit down and read something and focus. I love,
yeah, you're not made for school, but all you do is learn. So you're an interesting dude.
it is, yeah, it is interesting because yeah, I'm obsessed with taking in information, but it's all about like, I don't know. I do have a hard time sitting still, and so it did help me in that regard, and my it enhanced my performance at school, but at what cost? And for me, it was I guess I'm more sensitive to it than most other people because I knew other people that were taking way more than me and they were fine, but um it was at that moment that I really had to start addressing, like, why can't I focus? What am I even doing here? Like, why don't I have the motivation to do this on my own? What's the reason for me going to school? What's the reason for me being here? Do I even want any of this? Or am I just jumping through these hoops that were set out before me because that's what everyone else around me is doing, and that's what my parents wanted me to do, and all that stuff kind of, it really, I was blessed in a way to have to deal with that and to have to ask those hard questions, just because I couldn't keep going down the path that I was going. And for me, it was, if I were to have stopped taking amphetamines at that point, which I did, I had to go through a pretty, long recovery process to get back. I dealt with a lot of, lethargy for a while, a lot of brain fog. I had to drop out of school, and just kind of start from scratch. And that's been a huge blessing for me, because it has allowed me, it shot me in a different direction, and to try a
Right.
bunch of radically different things that most other people would not go near with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I guess I don't even know if you can answer this, but I know the pain is what drove you to ask those questions, but a lot of people just suffer. A lot of people, like, there's an opiate epidemic, and I guess what about you made you want to know why? Why were you asking all those why questions? Because that's what it sounded like to me. It's like, why am I in college? What am I doing here on this earth? Why can't I be like a normal person? Why do I need to take this prescription? Why is this prescription affecting me different than everyone else? Are you just a question asker by nature, or like what was that drive? What made you go within?
Yeah, I couldn't pin it down to a certain thing. I guess I'm just thankful that I did ask those questions. Maybe, one way I could look at it is that maybe I have a lower pain tolerance than other people. So I dealt with less of that pain than what other people would put themselves through. But I guess, it would just be my own intuition that was telling me, it had been telling me for years, that something was off, that I needed to make some radical changes. And I can't really fully conceptualize like what that is, or why maybe that voice is louder within me than other people. I don't really know, but I'm thankful that it was there.
Hey, I'm thankful it was there too, man. I think that's great. And you and I have talked a lot about the hero's journey, and I really think that there's something there that cures a lot of people's problems. And like I've been saying, mental health is like, I don't understand it really. I'm not a psychologist. I know there's chemical imbalances, but I think there are certain things that you can control. And Nietzsche is famous for saying, "A man with a why can bear any how."
Hmm.
So if you have something that's propelling you forward, driving you forward, you have a goal that you're aiming at, something you're going after, it makes life a lot easier, because life is tough, man. Fundamentally, life is hard. We're all going to die. Everyone you know is going to die. And that's hard to hear. None of us know how to deal with that. But there's so much ancient wisdom out there and trying to help us. And I think that the fundamental form of that is the narrative structure of the hero's journey and what you're doing on this earth to improve it, and taking that damnation, condemnation to death, but still like looking at it in the face and smiling and moving forward. There's something just super powerful about that in the human
Hmm.
spirit. And so like, do you think that play a role? Did you kind of figure out more of your why, get on your hero's journey and stop worrying about what was around you? Did that play an aspect? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the it definitely was. I didn't become super familiar with the concept of the hero's journey, or thinking about life, in terms of the hero's journey, until about a year after I left
Okay.
school. But that's been a prevalent theme in my life since then. I think at the time it was more so, it was hitting a brick wall with, I couldn't move forward anymore. Physically, I just couldn't do it. And emotionally, I just, I had a lot of cognitive dissonance at that time. And I I was just forced to go in a different direction. But I think a big part of it too was just general curiosity about what else was out there, because I did a lot of traveling um, around the west of the United States in college, and mainly due to rock climbing and other outdoor activities. But anytime that I had time and extra money, I would go out and leave. And I just felt so much more solace out there and outside of the world that I was in, at the university setting, and just in a general urban or suburban Midwestern slash Southern conservative setting. I was curious what else was out there. And the more that I found what else was out there, and I'd find myself in some interesting situations with some really eccentric people, it felt, I felt like I was less crazy.
Okay.
And I felt like, oh wow, there are other people out there that just, said, screw it, I'm gonna leave, I'm gonna do something else, or I'm gonna try something different. And I was always innately drawn to that eccentricity.
Okay. So that's super interesting because the common theme, it sounds like, between you and those people is your eccentricity. So you are all completely different, but you're all different in the same way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that was kind of the connecting. It's a tribe of misfits that the only connecting factor really is that we're all misfits.
Hmm.
And I hate the term misfit that has a negative connotation to it, because I think that just makes you a unique individual.
No,
And
yeah.
you're embodying your uniqueness, and there's nothing cool about conformity generally. Obviously you need to conform to a certain level. We all have to speak a similar language in order to communicate with each other, but if we have a lot of different thinkers who can come from different perspectives, that seems like that's beneficial to attacking the problems that humanity faces on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a fundamentally good thing from an evolutionary standpoint to have many different kinds of people in the world, and different kinds of people doing different things and living in different ways. And yeah, for one reason or another, I was one of those people that felt compelled to be different and to live differently. And the longer I live and the more I go, I am kind of learning just more and more that that is true for me.
Okay.
And that, if I do have any purpose in this life, it is to contribute to making, or living differently, living outside of what this of how this society currently lives and operates, which I'm finding now is becoming more and more relevant.
Mm-hmm. as
Back then,
as
yeah, it was more of a personal preference back then, but now I'm realizing, there is a lot of merit to this, because if things continue to get bad here, we're gonna need, if whether it's politically or economically or ecologically, we're gonna have to start doing things differently.
Differently, right, and that's what's frustrating me politically. I'm politically homeless. I don't like the blue team, I don't like the red team. I don't
Hmm.
call them by their names, they're just blue and red to me. And I
Hmm.
think that the problem that I have with both of them is they're just doing the same solution to the same problem that they've done over and over and over again in
Yep.
slightly different ways. So if it hasn't worked before, what's going to make it work now?
Hmm.
And I like the hyper individualism, and I want to ask you about individualism versus collectivism. So I think, like you alluded to earlier, the left socially is very individualist. They think you should be able to do what you want, be who you want, and not only be who you want, embrace who you are as a person. And I think economically, the right is very individualist. You pull
Hmm.
yourself up by your bootstraps, you make your money, you do what you got to do.
Hmm.
So do you see yourself across that divide? And where does the collective come in? Because we do need to think about the greater good generally of everybody. So how do you incorporate those two polarized aspects into your life, collectivism and individualism?
Yeah, I love that question. So yeah, it's about, for me, I just think, if I haven't dealt with my own inner demons and I haven't gotten my own life in accord, then, and I'm not responsible for myself, then I'm going to be looking to somebody else to be responsible for me and to fix my problems for me, which then ultimately will give certain people a lot of control and a lot of leverage. And I think that that could be an inherent problem in the framework of society. And I think it is important, like the better of a person and the more like realized of a person you can become, and more conscious and aware person you can become, the better you can then help other people. And the better you can then, be a leader and contribute to the collective. And I think a healthy collective is composed of a bunch of healthy autonomous individuals. And so I guess it's kind of the, in I guess a personal evolution of things. There's independence, or there's dependence, then independence, then interdependence.
I
And
like that. I
yeah,
like that a
yeah.
lot.
And right now there's a bunch of dependent people trying to call the shots and wanting, trying to like cater society to them so they can continue being dependent. And and then there's a bunch of very independent people that want to take control of that, or they want to take advantage of that, I guess. And I just think, you need to go through a process of, realizing that you are dependent in all these different ways, branching out and self-actualizing into yourself, becoming independent, not needing anybody else, but then at the end of that, choosing to live and choosing to work with other people, in a more autonomous way, rather than like a way where you're kind of forced to, I guess, if that makes sense.
I like that a lot. No, I think that's great. And I think so. Let me see if I've got this right. And I'm going to try to make a metaphor out of it. So you start
Mhm.
as a child, you're completely dependent on your parents. Hopefully, you grow into an adult. As you're an adult, you become independent, where you don't need your parents with you. Because I think we have a lot of paternalism going on at a governmental and national stage.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then once you can handle your independence, you can become interdependent across the group of independent. So it's almost like, it almost goes back to blockchain. You have
Yeah.
independent nodes that control a decentralized system that's all one. So it goes
Yes.
back to the oneness thing,
Hmm.
that is both centralized and decentralized by nature.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great connection and a great
That's
segue
cool.
into our next blockchain question.
Yeah. Oh shit. Yeah. I don't know if I have any more, honestly. I know I have more, but I want to, like, I guess I don't want to get too into crypto necessarily, because
Hmm.
I'm more interested in the technology. And centralization and decentralization have fascinated me forever, because like collectivism and individualism, it's this, all right, I'm going to get meta here. Life has a lot of binaries, but I think the point of life is to mediate between those binaries. So
Mm.
there's excess and there's the opposite of excess. So like if you have too little water, you die of thirst. If you have too much water, you drown.
Hmm.
If you have too much centralization, it's authoritarian. If you have too much decentralization, it's chaos.
Yeah.
So there's this mediating factor where I call it the balancing act of life. You've got to find your middle in that third realm. What do you
Hmm.
think about that?
Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah, life is all about balance, and I guess there is everything we've been talking about, or a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, is kind of this concept of polarity. And
Right.
so, and that's the large fallacy of our political climate right now, because the further you pull one way, the further you're going to create that opposite reaction.
Right.
And so, I mean, you could see, where we're at right now in society today with cancel culture and with all this radical leftism was a response to the Trump movement.
Right.
And so I right now I'm just thinking about what's going to be the next
Trump.
conservative response to come
Yeah,
out of
because
this.
it's an unending chain. Because I'd say
Yeah.
Trump's a reaction to intersectionality that Obama used to get
Hmm.
elected. Obama is a reaction to Bush's willingness to go and invade foreign countries. And so, yeah, we
Hmm.
have a never-ending blame game of politics there,
Yeah.
that anyone can delve into.
Hmm.
And the dichotomy, it's a false dichotomy.
Hmm.
And that's the problem too. There's no third choice. We're limited to two choices generally, which I think is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
But I want to get back to the fundamentals, and there's something to that mediation between the duality and the mimicry of biology. You call it biomimicry, but you said that earlier.
Hmm.
Um, in man-made systems, I think it's fascinating that Newton's physical law of every action has an equal and opposite reaction is mirrored in a political system which was created by humans. It's not inherently natural. It wasn't around before us. We created this political system. Maybe you could say it was. Maybe apes have a political structure that's just very rudimentary, but it's fascinating how that physical law holds true on an artificial institution.
Well, that's separating humans from nature,
Which is
and so yeah, since we are nature, it is natural. Everything that humans do is kind of operating on the same, the same laws at which the greater cosmos is operating, and that's why I can't tell you how many more like valuable metaphors and life lessons I've learned through like farming and gardening.
really
There's just so much inherent intelligence in all of it, even though it is very slowed down and goes at a different pace than what humans are used to going at. There is a lot of there's so many metaphors and intelligence in that whole process, and I think it is like a shortcut in some ways to really look into nature and to get into nature to find a lot of these truths and these principles just from observation of what's going on around you. And then you can take that into the human realm, and then you can see all these parallels between it. And I think, it is interesting how our society kind of going reckless is coupled with a decoupling of humans and nature. It's like we've kind of lost touch with a lot of these principles and a lot of these things, and because we have a blind spot to it now, it's completely ruling us and it's out of control.
fascinating. And so I want to get into that agrarian topic you were talking about, because to me, Christianity, Islam, Judaism all kind of emerged out of the agricultural revolution. And of course, a lot of metaphors like Jesus sowing the seeds. There's a whole lot of agrarian wisdom in there that I think is hard for modern humans to identify with. And I think this simulation theory is emerging similarly to the way that Christianic wisdom emerged out of agrarianism. It's emerging from the digital age.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's any validity to that? Do you think we're going to have a new type of religion for a new age that a modern human can understand? Do you think we'll adapt the old one? What do you think will happen in the future?
That is a fascinating concept. Yeah, that with a new revolution or a new like sign of an age coming in,
A new technology.
it comes because we're in the age of technology. Let's call it as it is, and
But
probably
agriculture, that was technology too. Learning how to,
exactly. I guess we refer to this as like electronic information's technology, I guess. I mean, I don't even know, but it is fascinating how it is reshaping from what we've learned from that and the parallels we see in that. It is reshaping how we think about ourselves, and conversely, that's going to be our religions and our spirituality even. And it just it goes to show that I guess truth is like changing with times, with how society develops itself and changes itself, that the truth of that society will then change as well, and it will be reflected. And
I think it needs to hurry the hell up personally, because we have the capability to wipe ourselves off this earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's terrifying, but it's true. And I think
Mm-hmm.
Weinstein talks about that too, saying we've become so smart, but none the wiser. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's right. We've invested so much human brain power into the physical world,
Mm-hmm.
but so little into the spiritual world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like we've left it behind and we're decoupled. We
Mm-hmm.
needed to catch up. And that scares me, if I'm being honest with you.
It scares me, and I've been needing to take a step back from all of the crypto stuff lately. Like I want to keep up with it because it's I'm heavily invested in it, and I do love it on some ends, but I do realize how ungrounded I start to feel after a while, because my head is spinning and I'm not, I just don't feel very healthy with it. And so I think it definitely needs to be balanced. All of this quick technological development, it needs to in some ways it needs to hurry up, or like humans need to hurry up and, I guess, get out of these old paradigms of the past. But in other ways, we really need to slow down
Right.
and get a higher perspective, or a bigger perspective of like what we're doing and where we're going with all this stuff. There's just so much like mind energy right now, and it's just like information, information, information. And like we were talking about earlier, there's this deeper intelligence within our bodies, a human intelligence, emotional intelligence. There's all these other things going on within us, a spiritual intelligence, and that we can tap into, that can, we'll know what's right or what's wrong, not by, factual observation, but by a deep, profound feeling within
Mm.
ourselves. And there's been a lot of, it is interesting. I come from a very religious family. My a lot of my nuclear family is just waiting for the rapture to happen, the Christian rapture to happen, and they're all just saying these are the end times. I tend to think of it as we're going through a big transition in society, and what society will look like in the future is going to be unrecognizable to how it was in the past. We're never going back to that, and that's an uncomfortable thing to think about. But um, you know, I where was I going with that? So my family, spiritual Christian. I think I lost my place there.
Yeah, I kind of lost where we were too.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man.
That's fine. That's fine. So I guess the other place that biomimicry is really taking place right now is in markets. So we've talked
Mhm.
about this before, but I think it's really interesting that obviously evolution, survival of the fittest, we haven't created. In nature, there are selective pressures that decide who survives, what genes are carried on, and which aren't. And I think markets are very similar. The collective decides what products carry on and which don't, whether they're effective or not. And I think that a lot of our geopolitical uh, ad conflict has moved to different realms. So instead
Mhm.
of bombing someone, fortunately, we still do that, but it's moved a lot more to market takeovers or cyber hacking, getting into different countries, inner workings of their computers. And I think that a lot of like Genghis Khan type men that generally have just messed up society whenever they get an army on their side.
They're now nerdy programmers in their mom's basement.
Right. They're
Mhm.
brilliant entrepreneurs or computer scientists or things like that,
Mhm.
that their ambitions can be put into something maybe detrimental, but at least somewhat productive, and there's less loss of human life. Do you,
Mhm.
do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say like the heroes that I look to now, conversely, on the other side of that, it's like the heroes that I see in the world are also programmers.
Yeah.
And the people that that maybe in the past we'd look to, like Achilles, or some great warrior who, it's like now I look to that as like the great problem solver,
Yeah.
or the great coder, the person who can put it all into the digital world, because that's where all of our innovation is going, and that's where our whole society is moving. And yeah, in some ways it's a good thing, in some ways it's a bad thing, and there will be some adaptations, I think, in a lot of who knows what the greater implications are of digitizing everything, what, and merging man with machine or artificial intelligence. Like it will redefine what we think of as human beings and human experience. And in some ways it's really exciting, in other ways it's very terrifying.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. And so I think to wrap it up, I want to put something forth that might be a little crazy and hear what you think. But I've heard this before, talking about how aliens are future us. And if you think about those selective pressures, what's different between us and aliens? There's no muscle. So being physically powerful doesn't matter anymore. They have giant heads to house a massive brain and just great big eyes to look into whatever they're doing. And they're surrounded by great technology. Do you think we are going to become the aliens, Grant?
That seems to make a lot of sense to me. Yeah,
It's
it
pretty
definitely
logical to
does.
you.
It's pretty logical to me. That's kind of the progression of things. And Yeah, one interesting thing that I came across recently, I forgot who said it, but the fact that uh, emotions, like aliens typically aren't very emotional.
They're cold.
They're very cold. And if that is the way we're moving, then it seems that, like, maybe humanity can't progress because our emotions are completely out of control and very, very powerful. And
Interesting.
that's something that I thought was
So
interesting.
actually, to build on that, if we could understand each other without speaking, I think the maybe not emotions, but the need for showing our emotions is a lot less important. So like if I smile at you, you could know that by us communicating in a different form. So maybe that's the alien idea.
Yeah,
They're all so well connected with each other that they know what's up without having to show each other what's up.
maybe they are incredibly emotional. Yeah, they just don't
Yeah.
have to show it
We not in our way. We can't see it.
because they got Skynet going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. No,
Gosh.
Grant, dude, it's been awesome speaking with you. It always is. We can talk for hours. Honestly, my brain's getting a little tired. So
Yeah, likewise.
yeah, we did a clubhouse right before this. But
Mm,
Grant, I'd love to have you on again to talk, dude. It's been so great talking to you. We need to meet up in person at some point and actually hang out. But thank you so much for
absolutely,
coming
man.
on, man.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
I did too. Thank you.